capable of handling demand as well as during the morning. So it's really only a constraint that we have during the peak. And what that means is that we can cope with the demand during the day. Fortunately, this also then puts us in a position where we have less of an impact on business life in particular. We do understand that after 5 o'clock, the impact on the domestic consumer is particularly pronounced, and that is highly regrettable. And we have clearly got a challenge with resolving that. We will give you more feedback on that when we ask our technical colleagues to comment. But at least we do not disrupt the morning peaks as well as during business hours. Now, if we take a look at the system overall and we look at which units are not performing, we have units down at Arnott. We've got 2 units out at Arnott. We have a unit out at Duva, Unit 2. That unit has been out for more than 6 months. So a very poor performance there from our in-house contractor, ERI, as well as the power station team. In bringing that unit back, it was supposed to have come back on the 5th of May. That date was not met, and appropriate action will be taken there to ensure that we can accelerate the bringing back of that unit. I may just again remind everybody that we have Koeberg Unit 2 out on a refueling outage. That deprives us of a highly reliable, highly predictable 900 megawatts. Of course, we had the hydrogen explosion at Medupi, Unit 4. That takes another 720 megawatts out of the system. And the combination of these 2 units in particular really has put us in a position where our capacity is incredibly constrained. Other power stations that the country may be quite familiar with, the Tutuka power station, it's currently got 3 units online, so doing rather better than has historically been the case. And we look forward to a continued improvement from that unit. So thank you to Selo Mametja and the team, doing a good job there. We've got 2 units out at Matla, and that adds to the constraint. Matimba, we continue to have challenges with our cooling fans, and those cooling fans cause load losses. Back when the station was conceived and built in the 1970s, station was oriented in the wrong direction relative to the prevailing wind, and that has caused us to be very dependent on additional cooling. And when our cooling fans don't function as they should, then we suffer what are known as vacuum load losses. Majuba continues to perform quite poorly. We've got 2 units out completely, but then we have 511 partial load losses in addition to those 2 units that are out. So that's quite disappointing. One of the stars of our fleet, Letabo, is having a very difficult time at the moment. There are 2 units out on unplanned losses, completely out, and then there's 1 unit out on planned maintenance. Now, this in total deprives us of some 1,500 megawatts of normally highly reliable capacity. So we are focusing a lot of attention on Letabo to try and improve the situation there. A big disappointment is the performance of Kusile. At the moment, we only have 514 megawatts coming out of that plant, with 3 units in commercial operation and 1 unit being non-commercial. So the non-commercial unit, one can accept that unit is still being subject to testing, but Unit 1 and Unit 3 are out on unplanned outages. And the major challenge that we have at Kusile is the novel technology of flue gas desulfurization, which we have struggled to bed down. This particular emission control equipment causes us to have a single point of failure on a unit. So if the unit doesn't work, there is no way of bypassing the FGD, as it's known, and that then causes us to have to shut down the entire unit. So particularly on Unit 1 at Kusile, we have been having considerable challenges on our FGD unit, and we have obtained the support of the original equipment manufacturer to come in and assist us, but we're really struggling to get that unit under control. Finally, Kriel Power Station, which was featured in the news this morning. You may have seen a report on News 24 about a significant diesel theft syndicate that has been disrupted there, diesel and fuel oil, and that plant currently has 2 units completely out and partial load losses of 300 megawatts. So that's another 900 megawatts of capacity that we do not have available. Our reserves are looking in reasonable shape, but we have to bear in mind that we have to top up our peak demand with burning diesel at our open cycle gas turbines. We have another vessel that will dock at Saldanha on the 24th of May. So we have to manage our diesel inventories very carefully to ensure that we do not lose our emergency reserves. Our dams are looking healthy as well, so our reserves are in reasonable shape, but it is really the full load losses that we see across the generation fleet that are hampering us at the moment and making it very difficult for us to meet the demand during peak hours. With that, Sikonati, I'm going to pause, and I'm going to ask our Chief Operating Officer, Jan Oberholzer, to come in and give us further insight into some of the reasons for this performance.
Thank you, Andre. Good morning to all that is connected. On Friday evening, Kusile one tripped. Now Kusile, that we talk about 700 plus megawatts. Now this tripped and the turbine failed to shut down properly, resulting in delays, in returning this unit, successfully back to the grid. Now this unit is now only expected, as Andre has said, tomorrow or latest by Tuesday. Now this is a significant
Excuse me, you are muted.
Oh.
There you go, it's fine now. Go ahead, please.
Oh, that's strange, because on my side, I don't know what we've heard, but Sikonati, do I need to repeat from the beginning?
Maybe go back 15 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, let's then quickly go through it. On Friday evening, Kusile one tripped, that's 700 megawatts, and the turbine failed to shut down properly, resulting then in delays to successfully return this unit to, to back for service. Now, this unit, as the GC has said, is only now expected back by tomorrow, or the latest by Wednesday. So, however, what happened over the weekend? On Saturday, 8 of our generators suffered breakdowns. Now, it was Letaba 3, 6, then Majuba 1 and 4, Tutuka 4, Camden 1, Indrina 2, as well as Arnott 1. Now, of those, only Majuba 1 has returned successfully to the grid, while Tutuka 6 and Letaba, that failed previously, also returned to service on Saturday. So what we've lost on Saturday, much more than actually what we have gained. Now, the planned outage also of 650 megawatt import from Kohora Bassa did also not return to support the evening peak on Saturday as anticipated. So the net effect was a reduction in generating capacity on Saturday of over 2,500 megawatts before evening peak, which then resulted, unfortunately, in us having had to implement stage 2 load shedding at very short notice. Now, on Sunday, the import at Koeberg again reduced by 550 megawatts. And that was to perform, planned maintenance, annual maintenance, at the terminal here at Apollo substation, in South Africa. Now, the imports were increased as planned, fortunately, towards last night, and that did support, this 550 megawatts, the evening peak last night. Then also last night, Hendrina 7 returned successfully. However, Koeberg as well as Hendrina 7 was not enough capacity that was added to the grid in order for us not to implement the load shedding, last night. Now, the GCE was talking about, Letaba power station, usually a very excellent performing power station. However, we suffered some boiler tube leaks at Letaba. So, and that is usually taking some time, to deal with that. Now, if I stand a little bit back, in the past week, the last 7 days, in total in our fleet, we had 8 units, Letaba 1 and 3 and 6, Kriel 1, Majuba 4, Matla 4, and Hendrina 5, and Hendrina 2. They have all been shut down due to boiler tube leaks, and that actually removed about 3,800 megawatts, capacity from the grid. Now, these boiler tube leaks, depending on the severity and the location, in the boiler of these tube failures, these units require anything between, between 12 to 16 days to repair the damage actually before we can return it again successfully, to service. Now, so far, only Letaba 1 has returned to service, while the other 7 units are expected during the course of this week. So 3,800 megawatts due to boiler tube leaks does really put us back over and above the other trips and breakdowns that we did have. Now, to repair a boiler tube leak, it's first necessary to force cool the boiler by using, the enormous fans to blow air through the boiler. Now, this, as I said, usually on average take about 12 to 16 hours to cool, sufficiently for people then to gain access into the inside of the boiler. Now, once inside, the exact tube where the failure must be identified, and due to the close proximity of the tubes to each other, often, adjacent tubes are damaged, which then also require repair. Now, these damaged tubes are then cut out and new tubes welded in place. And sometimes, adjacent healthy tubes, or when you want to gain access, need to be removed and replaced, when you have to repair these tube leaks. Now, as an example, again, Letaba 3, the boiler tube failure that we currently have requires in excess of 100 welds to be made, just to address the damage that we currently have. Now, and then since a boiler is a high pressure vessel, the work must be done and inspected according to industry standards before the boiler then can be returned successfully, back to service. The system operator has also requested me to deal with the following issue, and that is, we often refer to maintaining the supply and demand to make sure that it is in balance. Now, you will recall a previous feedback session, the GCE actually referred to the frequency, if I remember correctly, as the heartbeat of the system. And we maintain this at 50 hertz by matching the customer demand for electricity in real time by dispatching generation in real time. And it's important to understand this is in real time. So unfortunately, there is no bulk storage of electricity. Like if you take a tank and if you need some water, you open a tap. Unfortunately, that we do not have. So when we need electricity, that means that we have then to generate that electricity, by the power stations. And it changes from minute to minute, hour to hour. And as it's needed, we instruct the generators then, to ramp up or to ramp down. Now, so let's use another example. When you turn on your kettle or stove or you open your fridge, now a small amount of coal is fed into a boiler at one of our power stations at that very moment, then to generate the electricity that you need, either to boil your kettle or whatever the case may be. Now, over the weekend, the demand for electricity is lower than during the week. And so as we go into, usually on a Monday morning, we need to bring online a lot more generators to supply the increased demand. Now, depending on how long a coal-fired generator has been offline, it can take up anything between 4 to 72 hours to start it up and to begin generating electrons. So we are frequently experiencing delays during, a startup of these generators due to the failures of some of the thousands of components that we need to work seamlessly to allow the generator then to produce electricity. Now, there are components such as, let's use example, pumps, strainers, conveyor belts, valves, etc. Now, the delayed startup of generators has, over the past 3 weeks, been a significant contributor, to the power system being constrained. And once again today, as I speak, we are experiencing delays in returning generators to service at some of our power stations. So if we then look at the week ahead, in addition to what the GC has said, we are short of the generating capacity that we need to supply the country's demand. So the units undergoing boiler tube leak repairs are going to take a few more days, as I said, to return to service. And the Kusile 1 repairs will hopefully be completed by tomorrow and latest on Wednesday, that unit can return, successfully back to the grid. So just to repeat what the GC had said, the current outlook is that we need to implement, stage 3 load shedding tonight. Although it may increase, and I think it's important to make this point, it may increase if there are additional breakdowns. Now, the 3 units that we did expect to return to service successfully, they have returned as we speak early this morning, and well done, and thank you to the colleagues. However, because of the unreliability and unpredictability of our system, should something drastically happen, we may be forced to increase the stage of load shedding from 3 to 4. Now, also in tomorrow, we are foreseeing the stage 3, then stage 2 on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So that is the outlook currently. Currently, we see that the load shedding will be implemented between, as the GC has said, between 5 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night. However, we need to take note that the outlook currently is that we're still going to make use of a lot of our emergencies, and specifically burning a lot of diesel. And depending on the extent of how we need to use our emergencies, we trust it will not happen, but we may be forced, to implement load shedding throughout the day. We will try our best to avoid that, but that, unfortunately, that risk, it does exist. Now, RBC, the general manager of our peaking plant, sent me a WhatsApp this morning, and I thought I'll just share it to you for information. Now, currently, our off-site stock levels in Cape Town for Ankerlig is about 12 million litres. At Goriqua and Mossel Bay, it is 8 million litres. The GCE made it clear that we're only expecting a vessel, although we're trying to expedite on throughout the day to try and expedite the vessel to dock earlier than the 26th of the month. We are currently burning 2 million litres per day. So it is a significant burn. And for the month to date, we have burned 40 million litres already. So we really have to look at our emergencies, that we do not run out of diesel. The water looks fine, but we may be forced to use more water, and so we've got to make sure that we don't deplete our emergencies. So this is unfortunately where we find ourselves. Again, we regret, that we have to implement load shedding. The inconvenience, to the public and to the economy. We fully understand our mandate, make no mistake, to the country to make sure that there's sufficient electrons, to deal with the existing demand as well as to grow the economy. But we unfortunately still find ourselves with a system that is unreliable, it's unpredictable. Our colleagues within generation, they're trying their utmost. But this is where we unfortunately find ourselves. So the outlook also in winter, the risk of load shedding remains. So we will try our utmost to make sure that should we have to implement load shedding, that we limit it, to the bare minimum. But this is unfortunately where we find ourselves. So I'd like to request now Urulani Matabula, the Managing Director of Generation Acting, to please provide more details in terms of the performance of the system. And it's my understanding that he is also invited for today's media briefing, one of the cluster general managers, to also participate. So Rulani, it's over to you. Thanks.
Good morning, and thanks, Jan. I believe that you have covered a lot of items on your side, so I will not necessarily go into the details. I think we should obviously communicate that we're still running a very volatile system with the challenges we're having currently. There is a number of megawatts that we are bringing to the grid today and the days to come that we are forecasted. 2,000 megawatts today, 1,476 tomorrow, 1,600 the next day, and so forth. And the unfortunate thing about all this effort is that many a time we just find ourselves going back to this enormous amount of breakdowns. And our focus as generation team is to make sure that as we recover these units, we also make sure that when they return to the grid, we can keep them on load. I think that is key for us to be able to get ourselves as Eskom in the country out of this situation. So we have experienced a number of failures over the weekend, which has led us to the situation we're facing. But I'm confident that the team is working around the clock to make sure that we return these machines back on load. Boiler tube leaks remain our key theme in terms of our failures and resulting in these generators taking time to return. There is a refocus on that, re-looking at our strategies and our root causes to make sure that we can curb this common trend of boiler tube leaks, more especially at our big stations like Majuba and Letaba. So I would like to just give Karabo a minute to talk about the challenges at Kusile and Letaba as stations that are under his leadership. Karabo?
Thank you, Rulani, and good morning to all the listeners. Yeah, Letaba. Let me start with Letaba, which is at this point in time the flagship of generation on the coal side. We have 3 units that are having tube leaks. Unit 3, just to say again, Unit 3 ran for 452 days without a tube leak. So there's some good things that are happening on that side. And this time we've got a tube leak that is mainly at preliminary. We see it as fly ash road issues, and it should be back on load on Tuesday. And just looking at extent of the damage as the COO had explained. And then Letaba 6, it's one that will also be very quick to repair. We should be back on load by Thursday. We also see it as a fly ash erosion. And I think it's important to also make it clear to the public that, there are certain areas of the plant or inside the boiler, where when you have a tube leak, you cannot actually afford to run the plant for an extended period. And in this case, Unit 6, because it is in the superheater area, you needed to shut down as quickly as possible, just to avoid consequential damage. And I think it's a good thing, because there we're looking at about close to 10 pad welds to do the repairs, and then we'll be able to return the unit. So Letabo being one station that also receives bad coal, so although we've managed to run with it because it is consistent, we know exactly what needs to be done. So it's one area that when we have outages, we do all we can, to replace the tubes at the minimum thickness, and that is why you can have a performance of Unit 3 running at 452 days without a tube leak. Coming to Kusile 1, it's really a challenge. As the COO explained, after the unit tripped, the shaft could not turn, and it's mainly because the bearing gear could not engage. Once it engages, then you are able to put it on electrical bearing and start doing the check. So up to now, we are actually battling. I think it's important to note that we've got specialists from GE that are helping us. The guys work throughout the night, not being able to identify where the issue is, with together with our engineers at Kusile and Center of Excellence. They're still continuing today. There's fresh people that are coming in, and I'm also hopeful that we'll be able to find a solution between today and tomorrow, and to make sure that this unit is back on load. Other units that are out on my cluster, specifically on Chuplik, it's Matla 2, which the repairs are close to being finished this morning, so that unit should be back on load tomorrow. Good to report that we've got a station like Rothvley, which is the old lady, running 3 units, and all of those units are on load. And then the other 2 is Kendall, which is running 5 units at the moment. Although we're running with very high partials, but at least we've got 5 units that are sustainable, with Unit 2 on an outage sleep that we are looking at bringing in before the end of the month. Rulani, I'd like to stop there unless there's questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Karabo. Jan, maybe in closing, I just want to assure everyone that, as I always reported, this morning we are still running with the 6,000 capacity that is at risk due to various defects. And my focus is to make sure that that is minimized. So we need to minimize the amount of units that we're running at risk. We need to ensure that units that are on outage return on time and continue to run. We need these 400 days that Karabo has been alluding to at the moment. I have engaged suppliers in the past week to make sure that they can support us in making sure that when we send equipments for refurbishment at their sites, they are returned to us ASAP to make sure that we do not find ourselves keeping units off while waiting for space. So we are working on to ensuring that our units remain on the grid, and where there are defects, we are able to deal with the defects at a quick turnaround possible to make sure that we can have a sustainable grid than what we're having now. And that is our focus as the generation team. We don't want to be expert in firefighting and recovering units. We want to be experts in keeping these units on the grid. That is our focus at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sekunati.
I thank you, Karabo, Rulani, Jan, and Andre. Colleagues, Rulani Matebula is the acting general manager for generation. Karabo Rakwela is the general manager for a cluster of power stations that include, amongst others, Letabo. I'm going to now start reading your questions. Please may I request that you keep sending in more questions and do everything you can to limit them to the issue at hand, which is load shedding. All the other issues and questions that you might have, please direct them to mediadesk@eskom.co.za. Thank you. First question comes from Banele Kininza. He's from Business Report. Please explain the PFMA exemptions. What do they contribute to the load shedding problem? What are Eskom's priorities in utilizing the new advantage? Further down the questions, Manele wants also to know, how is Eskom going to make sure that these exemptions are not abused for corruption purposes by its staff? Andre, can you give us the overall view? I will check if either Gentry or Caleb Kasim is on here to talk about the PFMA exemptions and what they will do. Thank you.
Gentry
is also online. Thank you.
Gentry, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues. So first and foremost, there's two matters. One is the PFMA Instruction Note 2 of 2021 and 22. And that particular PFMA note is not an exemption. It is an approval by National Treasury to enable Eskom to, amongst other things, manage the expansions, deviations, and urgent procurement matters. So that will directly assist Eskom in terms of looking at OEMs, strategic suppliers, dealing immediately with production losses where materials or services are needed, and dealing, of course, with urgent procurement. So in that regards, it's given a lot more flexibility and agility to generation, in particular at the operating units and stations, to be able to see that procurement itself is not the reason for actually contributing to further production losses, for example, and load shedding. I think in terms of the PFMA exemptions, Eskom required these exemptions to allow us to continue in the interim while National Treasury is gaining the guidance from the Constitutional Court in terms of the implementation of the preferential procurement regulations and its validity. And this exemption allows Eskom to continue with critical procurement while the guidance is sought and while these new regulations are actually coming into effect. So what that basically two pieces of legislation assist Eskom is to actually manage the procurement and make sure that procurement itself is not the bottleneck for load shedding. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gentry. Gentry is head of procurement, general manager procurement. The next question comes from Mariam Issa. In your latest published weekly system status report, which is for the week ended 1 May, every week but 3 to the end of this year, color is color coded for a high risk of load shedding. Why don't you make the South African public aware of this rather than projecting outlooks which are too optimistic and taking people unawares when there is load shedding? What exactly is the projected shortfall for this evening peak compared to demand of just under 31,000 megawatt? Can we have an update for the current supply level, which you feel can reliably provide at this time in winter? Mariam Issa also says, in the power alert sent out yesterday, Eskom said that 2,094 megawatts was out on plant maintenance. This is considerably lower than previous levels, which you have targeted. Are the current difficulties which you are experiencing affecting your plant maintenance program? And will this not leave the plant more vulnerable in future? Mariam Issa from EE Business Intelligence. Jan Oberholzer, do you have an answer for us, please?
Yeah, thank you, Siganati. Mariam, thanks for the questions. Now, the shortfall for tonight is just under 4,000 megawatts. So if I look at the dashboard, as I have it in front of me, the load forecast is 30,929. So make it 31,000 megawatts for tonight. Now, the capacity that we will have available, that's excluding gas, is just over 27,000 megawatts, so 27,154. And then if you put in your reserves, then we talk 29,409. So, but then you have to add our reserves of 2,200, and this is the outlook, Mariam, as we have it now. So the system operator has made a provision for a shortfall of just under 4,000 megawatts. So this is where we find ourselves. Now, towards the end of May, and we're heading towards the end of May very quickly, we have a forecast of close to around about 33,000 megawatts. So this is why it's important that the units that we have on breakdowns now need to return successfully as soon as possible, and specifically, the big units. Now, the GCE, as said earlier, that what makes it extremely difficult is currently that we do have, Koeberg Unit 2, 920 megawatts. That is on outage, and it's only expected to return by the end of June. So it's another 5-6 weeks that unit will not be available, as well as the 720 megawatts of Medupi 4. So that makes it difficult. Now, your question, and then you also ask, can we share, the outlook? Yes, we can share it. Most certainly we can share the outlook. Unfortunately, that is a crystal ball that we have to our, available, and we can certainly share that, but life we know will change, and the situation will change, because we operating in a very dynamic environment related to our system that is unpredictable and unreliable. Then your question on maintenance, that it's low. Yes, it is, but we always plan, although we want to have our planned maintenance over a period of 12 months in excess of 10%. And wherever we can, we'd like to even increase that. Usually during the winter period, in order to accommodate these high peaks, specifically at night, we are tending, we always take the planned maintenance lower. Now, if you ask the 2,000, is it lower than what we would like? Yes, obviously, Mariam, most definitely. But, let's rather cut back a little bit for a week or 3, whatever the case may be, on some of the planned maintenance than having to revert, to a higher stage of load shedding. So the 2,000, typically we plan for around about 3,000 on average during the winter, maybe a little bit more, depends on how the system performs. But the 2,000 now, is it alarming? No, it's not. So the production team, they are looking at the system, they sit with a system operator, and then they plan, on a daily basis going forward. So that's where we find ourselves. Thanks, Sekunati. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Jan. Let's repeat this again for Miriam's benefit. Since we started load shedding, and in fact, since January 2020, we have said there will be a continuous high risk of load shedding, and that indeed continues. That is the case now. So the data portal that you see on the website is public material as part of the arsenal to make sure that information is easily and readily available. Kyle Cohen comes from News 24. He wants us to confirm the total expenditure, one, on Kusile to date, that's on building Kusile, and two, the flue gas desulfurization system at Kusile to date, and whether General Electric is indeed the original equipment manufacturer of that FGD. Jan, who built the FGD at Kusile, and how much did Eskom pay for it?
Thanks, Sekunati. It's not that I'm ducking the question. I can answer it, but I see Becky Nkumalo, the group executive for Group Capital, is connected. So if Becky, if you can answer those questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Good morning, colleagues. Yes, indeed, General Electric is the manufacturer of Kusile FGD. Obviously, they do work with other subcontractors, but from an Eskom perspective, we see them as the original manufacturers of the FGD plant for Kusile. Thanks.
Please tell us how much Eskom paid for that FGD, and please tell us how much has Eskom paid to date to build Kusile Power Station?
The built for Kusile in total approved is 161 billion. We're currently sitting at 146. Then part of that was FGD, which cost about 40 billion for the Kusile plant. Thanks.
Thank you, Peggy. The FGD was built together with the power station at Kusile at a cost of just under 40 billion rand, and that is included in the budgeted expenditure that Peggy has just given. William Horn of Netwerk 24 says, with multiple breakdowns occurring, especially in the form of full load losses, is this due to running the units in the red currently? Are generating units being run harder than usual? Rolani, do you want to answer that question, please?
Yeah. Sekonati, it is common cause, unfortunately, that our generation load factor has to be high, given the current challenges. So yes, our units are run as hard as we possibly can, because obviously of the current challenges in meeting demand. And however, the current challenges that we're experiencing, obviously we still have to do a lot of work in understanding the type of failures that we are seeing in most of our units, more especially the boiler tubes. And as Karabo indicated, it's still showing fly ash erosion, which is mainly obviously talking to the quality of our coal, as well as the way in which we are running our plants. So there is just a need that we get a window to be able to do proper maintenance on these plants. At this point, we are unable, obviously, to extend our outages. So we do these outages and on a risk-based forecast, so that we can bring back the machines and to be able to meet the grid requirements. So that is the situation we find ourselves in, and it is necessary that if we were to get the additional capacity, it will give us space to do proper maintenance and claw back on some of the load losses that we are currently experiencing on our plant. Thanks, Sekonati.
Kusile put. The next question comes from Mariam Issa. She wants to know when are we expecting Medupi Unit 4 to be back in service? Mariam, in the media briefing at the system briefing last week, Eskom said that unit shall be returning to service by August 2024. That has not changed. Jan, you might come in here to answer the questions from Chris Yeland on the nuclear. Please, can you advise the status and specifics of the Koeberg Unit 2 refueling and the life extension project? Has the refueling been completed yet? Has the reactor head on Unit 2 been replaced yet? What other work has been completed or is still in progress? Jan?
Thanks, Sekonati. Chris, thanks for those questions. Again, I have a detailed schedule here because I was expecting the question to come. But we have the Chief Nuclear Officer, Ridwan Bakardine, that is connected. So I would like Ridwan to please deal with this question. Thanks, Ridwan. And Ridwan, if you can also deal with the question that because we have postponed, the steam generator replacement, why is there no reduction in the time? If you can deal with that as well, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jan, and good morning all. So the scope of work, where we are currently with the outage, we're still busy with the maintenance scope of work. So that includes maintaining a lot of the nuclear power plant equipment,
pumps and valves. That's probably the biggest outage we've seen in the history of Koeberg in terms of just the sheer scope of work. A lot of that work is related to the life extension of Koeberg, that maintenance and inspections that needs to be done. We are also currently busy with the replacement of the reactor pressure vessel head, which commenced about just over 2 to 3 weeks ago. And that work is progressing. It's on track. There's still some more work to complete. And in parallel with that, we are completing steam generator inspections. So this work is what we've always done historically. We were with the steam generator replacement coming out. We've done this inspections again, this outage. So that work is now coming to its conclusion. And we've also done some pretty big modifications and work on the plant. Much of it related to life extension. So besides the steam generator replacement, our essential cooling water piping has been replaced in this outage. So that work is now being completed successfully. And then a lot of work also on the turbine components and the non-nuclear part of the plant. And that work will still be going on even past the point at which we complete the nuclear scope of work. So refueling will be then commencing in about, moving fuel back into the reactor will commence in about 2 weeks' time. What I should also, and thereafter it's the normal startup activities. So in terms of the steam generator replacement, the plan for this outage, when one moves one activity out, you don't just sort of say we save that amount of time during an outage. You basically have other activities that get done in parallel. So for example, the valve work that we spoke about, or this essential cooling water piping modification, another big mod, that work is still has run in parallel with the steam generator replacement and would have run in parallel with that. So by moving that out, it does not shorten the outage. We obviously looked at trying to take out or reduce where it was possible, but with the work being planned, everything in parallel, there was very minimal opportunities, and I think we have previously spoken to that. So the duration of the outage remains. The intent is to ensure that we come back as per plan for the outage. Thank you.
Thank you, Regan. The next question comes from Lunga Semelane. With load shedding from 5 to 10 p.m., why can't Eskom prepare for what is naturally a busy time as people return home from work? Why is the load shedding heavier at this? Why is the loading heavier at this time when businesses are closed? Also, what is the point of stage 3 load shedding in such a short time? Jan, you answered this question largely when you spoke about the inability to store electricity. Can you just repeat that, please?
Yeah, what I would like to do, if it's okay, the system operator, the general manager, system operations, Isabel Fick, is connected. And I would like to give her the opportunity to answer this question in some detail. Please, Isabel.
Good morning, everyone. I think we need to start answering the question by starting with the load profile. Jan has previously mentioned that we are now in a winter period. That means that we have distinct load profiling with a high morning peak and a high afternoon peak. So that's the first part of the question. The question referring also to when businesses are closed, that is true for the most part, but our bigger industries do not close overnight. They actually stay open, so there still is quite a high industrial load 24/7. And then, of course, people returning from work and with kids from school
That is the time in the evening when you start preparing dinner, when the kids get a bath, and all these appliances that you use, the geysers, the stoves, have got elements and they use a lot of electricity. So to answer your question, it's not about preparation. It really is an issue about the actual load going up for that short period of time. And that is why we end up shedding over the peak period over the evening. Other than the peak period, then if the question is why not for the whole duration overnight, it's because, of course, in the middle of the night, we don't have these occurrences and then the load goes down. So as the load goes down, we would end up in what we call a night minimum situation around 3 o'clock in the morning. So it really is a system network issue. As we've said previously, the system is a live system. That means it changes second by second. So we have to do the balancing second by second. But in the winter period, what you have to remember mostly is that we have a very high morning and a very high evening peak. In the summer period, this is a different scenario where we have more of a plateau throughout the day. And that's why you see this phenomena coming through now. I hope that answered your question. Thanks, Jan.
You, Isabel. Kyle Cohen of News 24 wants to know what exacerbates the boiler tube leaks. Is it coal quality or is it demineralized water problems? And he also wants to know, are the units shut down now due to boiler tube leaks the results of normal wear and tear? Jan?
Thanks, Egunati. Again, I'm going to ask, the generation colleagues. It can be Karabo or Rulani that can deal with that question, please. Maybe Karabo, if you want to, because we had now 3, boiler tube leaks at Letabo specifically. So if you want to deal with that question, please. Thanks. But also then just answer the question, please, Karabo, in terms of the question, which is the quality of coal as well as water, please.
Yeah. Look, we don't have the current tube leaks that we have has got nothing to do with water. The issue is the fly ash erosion, which is normal wear and tear. Under normal circumstances, there are areas of the boiler where you can shield them, but this one's it's areas where you don't necessarily can shield them. So it is areas where they are exposed to the ash. And yes, Letabo, as I've explained, has got very bad coal by design, but it's coal that we have always been able to handle. So that is why the intervals for outages is more frequent than other stations. So we try and do majority of the outages within 18 months of areas that we know they are susceptible to fly ash erosion. So in that case, that's where it is. So in terms of water quality, we actually control it very, very strict because it can affect all the units instead of one. So we're very strict when it comes to controlling the quality of water that we use. Thanks, Jan.
Thanks, Karabo. Just also deal with when we do not receive the quality of coal. If you can just deal with that as well, please.
When we battle with the quality of coal, and I probably should give an example of a station like Matla, where we are now getting over 6% additional ash that is not part of the contract. So it just makes handling very difficult, down the stream. One, it is the issue that this bad coal now goes through your mills, so you've got wear and tear that is higher than normal. Then you have to increase your maintenance cost in terms of or maintenance regime and cost in terms of mills. You do see it in the boilers as well by abrasiveness, and then the handleability of the ash. So as a result, we actually over and above the normal methodology of removing the ash. We are now tracking the ash at Matla as a result of this high ash content that we have in the coal. So really the quality of coal. It's quite key, and that's probably one of the areas that I know the CEE always, drives the message that we have to stick to the qualities that we have. Otherwise, we are just increasing the cost of the organization unnecessarily. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Karabo. Chris Yeland has come back with another set of questions on Koeberg Unit 2. The outage at Unit 2 was initially expected to last 120 to 155 days when the intention was to replace the steam generators. But now the steam generator replacement has been delayed till next year sometime. So one would expect Unit 2 to be back online by now, which is 120 years, mid-May 2022. When exactly is Unit 2 expected to be online and delivering 900 megawatts? Ridwan, please answer that question.
Sikonati, I have partially answered that, or I have largely answered the question, that we're still sticking with the original, or we have to take the original amount of time to do the work as planned for this outage because of the multiple and parallel activities and big scope of work for the outage. I just wanted to put up a very brief slide that just shows that. So we took out the steam generator replacement, and for those that can see on the screen, but you'd see there that there are numerous other activities that have to continue irrespective of that. So that's why the duration of the outage could not be amended because of taking out the steam generator replacement work. I trust that answers the question. So we're working towards end of June to complete this outage as per the original plan for the 155 days.
Thank you, Ridwan. End of June is when we expect Unit 2 of Koeberg. Maria Misa again wants to know, she says, Eskom is relying heavily on the use of OCGTs, which were intended for emergency use only. Is there any risk that these two may suffer breakdowns in the future? Andre?
Oh.
Yeah, no,
That's your answer. No.
One.
Jan, please, may you repeat what you just said?
Sorry about that. It seems that we have some network challenges here. I can confirm, Abhi Singh is unfortunately he's not connected, the general manager for picking, but I can confirm that we are tracking, and he personally is tracking the maintenance of the 14 open cycle gas turbines that we do have, the 9 at Ankerlig and the 5 at Gerikwa, to make sure that when it's due for maintenance, that it's actually taken offline and that we actually conduct the maintenance. Now, that we do have now and then, not that often, we do have some breakdowns, unexpected breakdowns. But Mariam, in general, I personally am very comfortable that we are, looking after those open cycle gas turbines the way we're supposed to, and we are conducting the maintenance that is expected to be conducted. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Ahmed Arif of Fin24 wants to know, Mr. Director, NUMSA has just issued a strongly worded statement saying Eskom is perpetuating a false narrative that it does not have money to meet workers' wage demands, and that you are undermining the Central Bargaining Forum by engaging the workers directly. How does the calculus work in terms of trying to balance the critical task of keeping the lights on, including spending money burning diesel, which is what the unions specifically highlighted, and meeting the demands of labor? Andre de Ruyter.
Thanks, Ahmed. That's a very good question. I must say, I don't think I've come across a NUMSA media statement that hasn't been strongly worded. So this one, I think, is a continuation of a process of negotiating in the media, which we don't like to do because we don't think it serves much of a purpose. If you look at the wage increase that was agreed in 2018, which provided for 3 consecutive years of 8% increases to Eskom employees belonging to the bargaining unit. This means that we have given these employees a 26% increase over 3 years from the base where they started. And this is because of the compounding of the consecutive 8% upon 8% upon 8%. Now, that is significantly higher than inflation. And we have, therefore, in the previous financial year, decided to offer a 1.5% increase to our bargaining unit. Just to remind everybody on the call, management have not received any increases or bonuses for a period of between 3 and 5 years, depending on the level in the organization. Be that as it may, we could not reach agreement with organised labour on that 1.5% offer. A dispute was then declared. This dispute is currently being adjudicated by the CCMA, and we are currently in the process of negotiating proposals for increases and changes to conditions of employment for the current financial year. So that is where we are right now. The 1.5% was implemented unilaterally, as is Eskom's right as the employer. If we are unable to reach agreement, obviously the unions have taken us on review on that, as is their right, and that process is running its course. I do communicate to employees of Eskom. I believe that it's the duty of Eskom management to do exactly that. We have in the past seen that messages that were very carefully constructed and very carefully communicated via in particular one union were significantly changed by the time that they were communicated to members. So in order to ensure that there is in fact not a false narrative being perpetrated, but in fact an accurate narrative being perpetrated, we have taken to communicating exactly what the employer as Eskom is offering to our workers in order to ensure that there is no possibility of a so-called false narrative being interposed by people in the middle trying to manage the message. Yes, it is a very difficult calculus in terms of trying to balance keeping the lights on and managing all of our costs. Eskom is still in a loss-making situation, even though our finances are somewhat better. So I'm not quite sure where IMSA get the idea from that we have an excess of cash available. That is definitely not the case, and we therefore have to make sure that we manage our costs across the board, and that includes making sure that we compensate our workforce fairly and also having regard to the financial health of our entity that we are responsible for managing. We are unfortunately not in a position where we can respond by acceding to organised labour's demands for a double-digit wage increase in the order of 15%, which was on the table previously, given the constrained financial situation that Eskom finds itself in. Thank you, Supanati.
Andre, before you go exactly on that point, Banele Kininza says, is there a standoff with NUMSA and Solidarity? Is that not likely to feed into Eskom's current problems? What is Eskom's position on labour demands? Do you have an answer for that, please?
Yeah, I think hopefully I've communicated our position quite clearly. Again, I don't want to communicate or negotiate through the media. I don't think that's appropriate, and it's certainly not in the spirit of engaging with the Consultative Bargaining Forum. But we don't have a standoff. There is a dispute on the unilateral imposition of a 1.5% increase by Eskom during the previous financial year, bearing in mind that that, of course, was during a time of COVID when many South Africans lost their jobs and had to take a pay cut. We were still able to motivate to our board for an increase, even though it was a modest one. And the situation that we currently have is that 1.5% is currently being adjudicated by the CCMA. So no, I don't think there is a standoff. I think that we are able to rely on our loyal and hard-working employees to support us, and we don't anticipate any unlawful industrial action emanating from the current dispute or the current negotiations. Thanks.
Thank you, Andre. Just to summarize again, the wage talks are happening at the Central Bargaining Forum, where Eskom has got 3 recognized labor unions, and Eskom has undertaken, as previously communicated, to keep all its employees informed about the negotiations. Thank you. Miriam Issa, your next set of questions. Your weekly system status report shows that your operating reserve margins are well below the 15% seen as best practice globally. In fact, they have been consistently below 10% in the last few weeks. Does this not point to heightened risk of severe load shedding in the immediate future? While we understand that the risk is small and do not want to cause unnecessary alarm, do you have plans in place as to how you would manage a national blackout and how it would take to get back up and running? Mariam, that question has really been answered ad nauseum in the past few weeks about the possibility of a blackout and what Eskom would have to do to get over that. Do you want to take one last bite at that, Andre? Let's take Jan. Okay, go ahead, please.
Miriam, yes, we are having to balance very finely a constrained system versus demand versus the risk of load shedding. And this is an ongoing balancing act that we are having to carry out, which unfortunately necessitates some compromise on all fronts. If we did all of the maintenance that we needed to do, we would have to take out approximately between 13 and 18% of installed capacity, and that would substantially exacerbate the load shedding. We are not in a position to do that. We don't have the headroom in spare capacity that will enable us to carry out that maintenance. We also don't have the liquidity to enable us to carry that out, nor do we have the necessary manpower to carry out all of that maintenance in a reasonable time to bring back the capacity as planned. So this is an ongoing balancing act that we need to maintain. Now, we do have a current management plan to deal with a national blackout, which we obviously want to prevent. Those contingency plans are in place. It is a risk that we have identified many years ago, and it's part of the requirement for a grid code. We have black start facilities at various plants throughout the country, and we are therefore in a position to give the country the assurance that a national blackout has, first of all, a very low probability, given that we have tools at our disposal, including load shedding, to manage the risk of that. And secondly, that we will be able to recover, probably that we are able to recover, and that we regularly update and test our black start readiness in order to ensure that we are able to have that ultimate safety net at our disposal. Bearing in mind that we, of course, have a number of different levels still of load shedding that we are able to implement to prevent exactly that national blackout. So at this point in time, I think it's imprudent to engage in too much speculation. because that is, like you point out, Miriam, likely to cause unnecessary alarm. So let's leave it at that. Thank you.
Maybe, Andre, I can just comment as well, just to build on what you're saying. Mariam, under my chairmanship, we meet every 3 weeks and to look at the readiness of all our Black Start facilities. So I can confirm that we are up to date. We've got a dashboard, as I say, that we track on a 3-weekly basis. As a matter of fact, we had a meeting at 7 o'clock this morning. So this is an area that receives a tremendous amount of time. So that's the only additional contribution that I want to make to the GCE. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Chris Yelland says, and I'm going to ask you, Andre de Ruyter, to come and give comment on this one. I asked this question at a previous media briefing, but I was fobbed off and told to direct my questions to the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. After 15 years, the public and customers of electricity are tired of hearing why we have load shedding and want instead to hear what South Africa Incorporated is doing to end load shedding fast. So I feel I need to ask again, is Eskom doing anything to coordinate a joint media briefing with Eskom, the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, the Department of Public Enterprises, and National Treasury, where we can be informed of what South Africa Incorporated is doing jointly to end load shedding fast? Andre, I'm going to ask you to briefly tell the public what Eskom is doing to work with the government, and you may give us some highlights, including the recent instruction from National Treasury on the PFMA. And I will repeat this again. Chris, you are asking this question, as you did the previous one and the last one, on an Eskom media briefing. This is probably the 12th media briefing this year alone by Eskom to inform the people of South Africa exactly what is going on. Andre?
Right, thanks, Chris. Chris, I completely agree with you that South Africa is tired of load shedding and that we need urgent action to address load shedding. You are aware that as Eskom, we have been advocating for the urgent addition of between 4,000 and 6,000 megawatts. This is quite possible to achieve by removing certain regulatory and bureaucratic obstacles, such as the onerous registration process put in place by NERSA on embedded and own generation, less than 100 megawatts. There's also significant international precedent. For example, Vietnam added 9 megawatts in a year by changing the incentives for rooftop mounted solar PV. India have added huge capacity in a very short space of time, again, by removing some of the obstacles that existed in that country as well. So it is possible to add significant capacity quite quickly. Now, your idea is to have a joint media briefing. We don't think that having such a joint media briefing is the appropriate way to go. We are currently in a position where we are engaging with various experts in the field of energy, both local and international, with a view to making proposals to the policy department and others, as well as our shareholder department, to resolve the electricity crisis sooner rather than later. It is not our place, and I say this with a lot of respect, Chris, to coordinate joint media briefings with government departments. We report to those government departments, so we can't veer too far out of our lane by inviting people to media briefings. But we are in the process of soliciting views and opinions with a view to putting forward a consolidated proposal to the policy department as well as our shareholder that can be used to resolve the electricity crisis. I believe that there are levers to be pulled. They can be pulled quite effectively, but this is not something that is going to happen easily, and certainly is not only within the purview of Eskom to make happen. We are in the hands of a policy environment that needs to be conducive and needs to enable the addition of that new capacity. Thanks, Ignati.
Thank you, Andre. Jan, the next 3 questions are for you to deal with, please.
Well, the big disappointment is the performance of Kusile, where Unit 1 and Unit 3 are out on unplanned outages. That's one. And one of the journalists at the briefing accusing Eskom of providing outlooks that are too ambitious. Group Chief Executive of Eskom, Andre Director, there with his executive giving the latest system challenges, which have led to the latest announcement that Stage 3 load shedding will be implemented at 5 this afternoon until 10 p.m. and also for tomorrow, same time. He went through some of the station's specific challenges, such as 2 units out at Anode power stations, Tutuga having 3 units online, but Letabo power station